All right. Good afternoon. Just want to let you know the Secretary General is on a plane back here to New York. Sorry to speak that sentence out so slowly. I know you were anticipating something else. But anyway, he'll be back. He'll be in the office a bit later on today. And the Deputy Secretary General remains in Paris, where she's participating virtually in Transforming Education Pre-Summit, which started there today. The reason she's participating virtually is that she's just tested positive for COVID-19. She's fine. She's well, and she said she's grateful to be one of the privileged to have been vaccinated, and she's thinking of all the millions of people who are still without protection. Ms. Mohammed called for a continued push for vaccines, leaving no one behind. We issued a statement yesterday in which the Secretary General congratulated states parties to the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons on the successful conclusion of their first meeting. The Secretary General welcomed the adoption of political declaration and action plan, which helps set up the course for the treaty's implementation, and which is both important steps towards our shared goal of a world free of nuclear weapons. Turning to Libya, the leaders of the two chambers of Libya's government are meeting today and tomorrow in Geneva at the invitation of Special Advisor Stéphane Williams to discuss and reach agreement on the measures governing the transitional period leading to elections. Stéphane Williams said at the start of today's meeting, it is, quote, it is now the time to make a final and courageous effort to ensure that this historic compromise takes place for the sake of Libya, for the sake of the Libyan people, and the credibility of its institutions. As you will have seen, Rosemary DiCarlo briefed the Security Council yesterday and said that the UN is firmly convinced that elections are the only path to settle disagreements over the democratic legitimacy of Libyan institutions, adding it is high time to agree on outstanding issues and make elections happen. She noted that Libya had made significant progress in the last few years towards a more inclusive society, and for the sake of the people of Libya, she said, we should not allow this progress to dissipate. This morning, the Security Council is holding an open meeting, open debate on its working methods. This afternoon, the Council will meet again, this time on the situation in Ukraine, which Rosemary DiCarlo, the head of Peace Building and Political Affairs, will brief Council members on our behalf. We'll share those remarks with you as soon as possible. Turning to Syria, the UN resident and humanitarian coordinator there, Imran Riza, said today that humanitarian needs are unprecedented. Today, 14.6 million men, women, and children require aid, which is an increase of 1.2 million people from 2021, and the highest level since the crisis began. The rapid rise is driven by the deepening economic crisis, ongoing displacement, continued fighting, and in some parts of the country, and climate shocks. More than 90% of Syrians are currently estimated to live in poverty and food insecurity, which has reached historic levels. The UN is responding to meet needs. In 2021, over 7 million people were reached with life-saving aid each month. This includes an average of 4.5 million people in need reached in government-controlled areas. We and our partners have reached another 2.4 million people in northwest Syria through massive cross-border operation, which we very much hope will continue. Meanwhile, we've received just under 1/4 of the $4.4 billion that is needed for operations to continue. And turning to Yemen, our humanitarian colleagues are telling us that hunger is now at the highest level in the country since 2015. More than 19 million people are going hungry, including more than 160,000 on the verge of famine. Funding cuts are hampering our ability to help people in need. Last December, the World Food Program was forced to reduce food rations for 8 million people due to funding gaps and had to introduce another round of cuts last month. 5 million people will now receive less than half of their daily requirements, and 8 million people will receive less than 1/3 of their daily requirement. More than 8 million women and children in Yemen need nutrition help, including 500,000 severely malnourished children. By July, UNICEF may have to stop treatment for more than 50,000 malnourished children. 50,000. Also next month, UNICEF will suspend its work on safe water and sanitation for up to 3.6 million. And by July, the agency may have to will cut half its mine risk education activities, putting 2 million children and their families at greater risk of mine-related injuries and deaths. And on health care, the agency will suspend maternal child health support, which helps 2.5 million children and 100,000 people by July. Turning to Myanmar, our team there tells us that more than 1 million men, women, and children are now displaced across the country. In addition, more than 4 million children have not accessed education for 2 full academic years. This disruption to stable schooling is placing children in much higher risk of negative child labor, trafficking, and early marriage. We and our partners are staying and delivering despite serious access challenges and funding shortfalls. We've now reached 2.6 million people during the first quarter of 2022. Our ability to reach the remainder of the 6.2 million people identified in the humanitarian response plan will be dependent on increased funding, improved access, removal of bottlenecks such as visa delays, and banking restrictions. To date, only 11% of our $826 million humanitarian appeal has been received. And some good news for once from the World Food Program. Today, they welcomed the announcement by the G7 leaders that they will provide an additional $4.5 billion to protect the world's most vulnerable people from hunger and malnutrition as the world faces a global hunger crisis of unprecedented proportions. WFP says it is encouraged by the G7 commitment to ensure that trade remains open for food, fuel, and fertilizer, all of which are critical for countries bearing the brunt of the crisis. And the Food and Agricultural Organization today released a report on how reducing trade costs help. Let's try it again. The Food and Agricultural Organization today released a report on how reducing trade costs can help drive sustainable development. The report aims to guide policymakers to find ways to ensure that trade policies safeguard global food security and nutrition, respects the environment, and bolsters against shocks such as conflicts, pandemics, and extreme weather. More information on the website of our friends in Rome, and further, I think, to what you, Abdelhamid, where's Abdelhamid? You had asked me yesterday on Ethiopia and Sudan, and I can tell you the Secretary General is deeply concerned about the renewed clashes between Sudan and Ethiopia along their disputed border that took place on June 22nd and reportedly resulted in the deaths of 7 Sudanese soldiers and 1 civilian. He urges the 2 countries to take concrete steps to diffuse tension and to peacefully resolve their differences over the Al-Fashaga border area. The Secretary General expresses his condolences to the families of the victims. Voila. Kirsten. Microphone, please.
Does the Secretary General have any response to the horrific news of dozens of migrants being found in a trailer in Texas? I know he took part in the Summit of the Americas recently, and any reaction, any way he can see to stop this problem?
Well, I mean, let me just say on the specific event, I think he was shocked and saddened to learn that, I think the latest report talked about almost 50 people, migrants, died in the trailer in San Antonio. It's very important for us that authorities both in the U.S. and in Mexico investigate and bring to justice all those who were responsible for this horrific chain of events. This horror, I think, once again highlights the tragedy that migrants face and asylum seekers, And it also highlights the need for comprehensive strategies for safe, orderly, and regular migration in the region. It's very important for us that all parties work cooperatively in line with the Global Compact for Safe, Orderly, and Regular Migration and the Global Compact on Refugees to take concrete action to help prevent such needless deaths among people on the move. Edie.
Thank you, Steph. The G7 mentioned the Secretary General's package in their statement, and the Italian Premier Mario Draghi gave a briefing, and he called it one of the most important briefings that the G7 leaders got. And I wondered, and he gave some details of what the Secretary General said. First, I wonder if there's any update on negotiations, and secondly, is there any chance that we could get a similar briefing?
There is no update except to say that the discussions are ongoing, and I say that every time you ask me, but that has the advantage of being the truth, because discussions are ongoing. As soon as we have something to announce, something concrete to announce, we will do so. Yes, Betul.
Stéphane, on Yemen, you talked about the rising need of humanitarian aid, but do you have any update on the Safar oil tanker?
No, I think we're nothing new to what we've already said. Abdelhamid, and then we'll go to Celia.
Thank you. Muhammad Zubair, a prominent journalist in India who criticized Modi's government for not apologizing for Muslims whom they insulted by the statement by one of his spokesmen. He was arrested yesterday for his tweets. Any comment on that?
Look, I think, first of all, in any place around the world, it is very important that people be allowed to express themselves freely, journalists be allowed to express themselves freely and without the threat of any harassment. Your other question?
My second question about a Palestinian child. His name is Ahmed Manasra. He was arrested at age 13. He served 7 years in jail. His health is deteriorating. He was quoted as trying to kill himself. Another court will be held tomorrow to consider his release. In fact, the first court decided to release him, but the military decided to keep him. So any follow-up to his case?
I don't have anything specific on the case except to say that we have repeatedly called for the release of minors. Celia?
Hi, Steph. Each time there is an horrific event in the world, wherever, DSJ is deeply saddened. Could he say or do something better than being deeply saddened?
Well, I mean, we're asked for an initial reaction. People ask me for what his emotion was at the time, right? And we're talking about we were talking about the issue of the migrants in Texas. That's his reaction. You're asking me what he's doing. I think he has been working for a long time to try to get member states to work together, to agree and to live up to the commitments made under the Global Compact for migration. So, I mean, you can both feel shock and sadness and horror and also do something about it, which is exactly what he's doing. And, you know, let me, since you're asking me about that, I also want to say how to use a term we've already used, but how shocked we were at the images of the violence that we saw at the border between Morocco and Spain in North Africa over the weekend, which again resulted in the deaths of dozens of human beings, asylum seekers, of migrants. We saw the use of also of excessive force by the authorities, which needs to be investigated because it is unacceptable. States have obligations under international law and international human rights law and refugee law. All those must be upheld. People who are on the move have human rights, and those need to be respected. And we're seeing them all too often disrespected. And again, you're asking me what we can do. What we can do and what we will do is continue to push member states to uphold what so many of them agreed on in terms of the global compact on migration. Philippe.
Excuse me, when you say, follow-up, when you say excessive use of force, you mean Morocco, you mean Spain?
We've seen it on, from what I saw at least, on both sides of the border.
Good afternoon, Steph. Just a question on the East Africa, specifically the DR Congo. The East African leaders met to, and they agreed to send a regional military force to the DR Congo and to, I guess, help stabilize the resurgence in violence from the M23 rebels. So my question is on what you said in this press briefing last week when someone asked about this. You said the Secretary General supports this decision to send these troops to the DRC. So I have two questions. What role will the UN peacekeeping mission in DRC play regarding this? And why is the Secretary General supporting a military solution rather than a political diplomatic solution to this crisis?
Well, I think the Secretary General is always supporting a diplomatic solution. The decisions made does not, by the East African community, is not one that directly involves the peacekeeping force. I think it is very important that whatever other military forces are in the region coordinate their activities and also focus their activities on the protection of civilians. I mean, that's what we want. I mean, there is obviously, when you have security needs, because civilians are being killed, right, by armed groups, there's, of course, a security dimension to the solution, but there also needs to be a diplomatic one, especially when it comes to the countries in the region. We are also very much against the use of what we've seen are basically proxies of countries using armed groups to drive home a point, to put it diplomatically. So you can both understand the need for a security solution and also focus on diplomatic solution. Yep.
Recently, Jordan's King Abdullah, have told U.S. media that the war in Ukraine exposes need for a Middle East NATO. Any comment regarding this announcement? My second question: does really the world nowadays in a vital need for more coalition military? Thank you.
I don't really have a specific comment on that. You know, there have always been regional coalitions, security groupings, and that's up for member states to decide. What we do not want to see is a decoupling of various regional groups from each other. We think that there is an increased need for multilateralism at the global level. But we've also the UN has also always worked with various regional groupings. But what we want to see is a regrouping and a reaffirmation of the need for global multilateralism. Edward, and then we'll go a second round.
First, I want to have a confirmation. Yesterday, when mentioned about the Kremenchuk missile strike, you said a shopping mall has been struck, which means the missile hit the shopping mall, right? Because that's not what the defense ministry of Russia said.
That is our understanding.
Okay.
And I would say that for us, any attack, whether deliberate or undeliberate, of civilian infrastructure, where shopping mall clearly is, goes against international law.
So my second question, Ukrainian President Zelensky said that Russia must be labeled a state sponsor of terrorism because of these attacks. Would the UN consider Russia as state sponsor of terrorism?
It's not for the Secretary General to designate, to issue these kinds of designations. Betul.
Stéphane, question on Syria. The Security Council will be discussing the renewal of the mandate which allows humanitarian aid into Syria. In the coming days, you also mentioned it earlier, but there are also concerns that the last border crossing might be closed. Does the UN have a plan B, and what happens if the border closes? What are your concerns?
What will happen if the border if the cross-border crossing is no longer available to the UN, is that millions and millions of men, women, and children will suffer even more. I mean, I just read out a pretty horrific update of the humanitarian situation. We need both. We need the cross-border, and we need the cross-line. The cross-line alone will not help make up the difference if we do not get the cross-border.
Has the UN accelerated humanitarian aid into the country in case the border closes?
I think we are, if I'm not mistaken, at capacity in terms of bringing things in. Ephraim.
Just a quick follow-up on Yemen as well. Is there any progress on the issue of talks with the Houthis to open roads in Taz?
No progress to report.
Second one, in Libya, the meeting with Ms. Stephanie Williams, before the meeting happened, were there any signs that these two leaders are coming with some willingness to compromise on the most contentious issue of the constitutional draft? Because it sounds like it's still the same.
I think what we're doing is looking forward to positive signals after the meeting. I don't think there were much tea leaves read before the meeting.
Yeah. Sorry.
It's okay.
I hope this one is not very trivial, but I've been meaning to ask you, you expressed your frustration and the UN frustration at finding an SRSG for a place like Libya. Mm-hmm. And my question is, Stephanie Williams what is the difference between what Stephanie Williams is doing and what an SRSG can do or would do? Because apparently she's doing the same thing, apart from briefing the council maybe, and apart from not needing the council to appoint her.
I mean, the
difference between the two.
There's a title difference. She's a special advisor, which the Secretary General basically has the authority to name by himself, which he did. A special representative is named by the Secretary General with the agrément of or consultation with the Security Council. It is clearly as head of mission. It is a more formal and robust post. But Stephanie Williams, as you say, has been doing the work that she's been doing, because while we wait for us to be able to find someone that is acceptable to all Security Council members and to all the various parties that wish to opine on the naming of such a person, work needs to be done. Right? The situation in Libya is not put on ice, as we've seen. So, as always, we are making do with the situation that we are, with the cards that we have been dealt. Kirsten and then Abdelhamid.
following up on the Sapphire oil tanker, are we not approaching the deadline on that?
Well,
Wasn't there a concern that once we got into the summer months, it would be impossible to fix? And so is it the financing that we're still waiting on
We're
for
still
that?
waiting for full amount, for more money. I will check on the deadline issue, yeah, because neither you or me are clear on that. Yes, Abdelhamid.
Follow up on Libya. In his remarks to the Security Council yesterday, Ambassador Tahir al-Sunni of Libya sent two maybe indirect messages criticizing the members of the Security Council for not agreeing on the special envoy, and second, that the Libyans should be consulted on that. Do you subscribe to these kind of hidden messages in his statement?
Far be it from me to comment or analyze a statement of a representative of a member state. What I can tell you is that I think it's very clear from our side that we wish we'd had a SRSG a long time ago. But as I told Ephraim, in the meantime, Stephanie Williams is doing everything she can, everything she should be doing, but this is a mission established by the Security Council. There's a mandate for an SRSG. We don't have one. It's not from lack of trying on our part. Betul.
Just a quick follow-up on Libya, Stéphane. Does that mean that the SG is frustrated with the Security Council for not agreeing on a name? And then does he think that not being able to name a special envoy for Libya is also making it harder for the parties to reach an agreement on the elections?
I'll just, I don't think I'll express any emotion, but just to say that we've been at this for a long time, and we will continue to go at it. I think in the meantime, Stephanie Williams is again, she had a meeting in Cairo. She's now got the parties to meet in Geneva. What could have been if there had been an SRSG as opposed to a special advisor, I think none of us can predict. But what I do know is that we've not been sitting on our hands in the meantime.
One more follow-up. Would you say that it would make a difference if there was an SRSG?
No, I can't, listen, I can only deal with facts and what we have. Would we be in a different place today if we had an SRSG 3, 4, 5 months ago? I don't know. I can't predict the past. But we are where we are. Iftikhar, I think you had a question.
Thank you, Steph. My question has been asked by my friend Abdul Hamid, but are you calling for also the release of the Indian journalist who was arrested yesterday, as has been done by the Committee to Protect Journalists?
Journalists should not be jailed for what they write, what they tweet, and what they say. And that goes for anywhere in the world, including in this room. Okay. On that bad humor, I will hand it over to Paulina, who hopefully will straighten out the situation.